Today, we're stepping back into the 14th century. We're going to explore a series of really powerful allegories about life, about choice, and about the soul, all from one of history's most remarkable mystical works. But let me start by asking you something. If you could have a direct line, a real conversation with the divine, what would you ask? What would you want to know about your own life, your choices, the path you're on? It's a pretty deep thought, isn't it? Well, believe it or not, one woman in the 14th century claimed to have had exactly those kinds of conversations. Her name was Bridget of Sweden, and what she wrote down gives us this incredible window into the spiritual world of the Middle Ages. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to journey through 5 key allegories from her work. We'll start with the visionary herself, then walk the 2 roads of life, visit what she calls the 5 houses of the soul, witness a knight's critical vow, and finally, really wrestle with this idea of judgment and mercy. So first things first, who exactly was this woman who was receiving these incredible visions? Well, St. Bridget was a Swedish noblewoman, a mother, and eventually the founder of a religious order. After her husband passed away, she started having these extremely detailed, often really dramatic, visions. She would dictate them to scribes, and these writings, they ended up becoming one of the most influential books of the entire late Middle Ages. Now, one of her most powerful and honestly universal visions is this classic allegory about the big choices we all face in life. She calls it the 2 roads. So, this vision presents a really interesting paradox. You have the first road, the path of pleasure. It looks awesome at the beginning, right? It's easy, it's fun, but according to Bridget, it ends in complete misery. Then you have the second road, the path of toil. This one starts with effort, with discipline. It's the harder route for sure, but its destination is joy and peace. It's that timeless choice, isn't it? Short-term fun versus long-term fulfillment. So what's really crucial here is that this is all presented as a totally rational decision. The wise traveler in her vision looks at these 2 paths and just makes a logical choice. They realize that a little bit of hard work now is a really small price to pay for ultimate happiness later on. Okay, let's move to the next allegory because you can see how these ideas start to build on each other. This vision expands on the consequences of our choices, sorting souls into 5 distinct spiritual states, or as she calls them, houses. The vision lays out 5 of these houses, and each one represents a different stage on a person's spiritual journey, from being totally disconnected to being completely devoted. To really get a feel for this, let's just look at the 2 extremes. So the journey starts at the first house. This place is described as being filled with unfaithful Christians. And what's interesting is these aren't non-believers. These are people who call themselves Christian, but only in name. The text describes them in really stark terms. It says they complain about divine judgment, that their promises are totally empty, their actions are completely separate from their supposed faith, and it leads to this state of being, as the vision says, spiritually unclean and nothing. Now, let's jump all the way to the other end of the street, to the 5th and final house. This is the home of those the vision calls the friends of my son. And wow, the contrast with the first house is just striking. I mean, look at the language here. Glad, joyfully. For these souls, faith isn't some heavy burden. It's an active source of delight. Their commitment is what nourishes them, and their spiritual foundation is described as being totally unshakable. It's a complete 180 from the emptiness we saw before. So we've seen these big, broad categories of souls, but now the vision zooms way in to a really personal story, the allegory of a knight and his sacred vow. In this story, knighthood isn't about swords and shields. It's about a spiritual promise. To become a true knight for God, a person has to vow 3 things: absolute faith, more self-discipline than ever before, and a focus on eternal reward instead of worldly pleasures. But then, of course, comes the big test. We get to see the knight's inner struggle play out right in front of us. On one side, you have God, the first Lord, offering these unseen eternal rewards. But on the other, the devil, the other Lord, is promising something tangible, worldly honor, right here, right now. It's that classic battle between faith in the unseen and the pull of what's right in front of our eyes. And the knight makes his choice. He deserts. The text describes it so vividly, he literally throws down his shield of faith. He's casting aside his spiritual protection because he wants that immediate, selfish reward more than the promise of future joy. And the consequences is intense. At the very moment of his death, 3 voices rise up to condemn him. One for his pride, a second for his broken promise, and a third for trading the infinite creator for finite creation. And this brings us to the final, big picture theme that really ties all of these visions together: the relationship between divine judgment and divine mercy. Now, after hearing about the knight's fate, you might think this whole system sounds incredibly harsh and unforgiving. And you know what? The text describes justice in exactly those terms: absolute, powerful, unchangeable. It's not random, it's a fundamental law of the universe, as immovable as a mountain. But, and this is probably the most crucial point of the entire work, absolute justice doesn't cancel out the possibility of mercy. The text is very clear: for anyone who humbly asks for forgiveness, love and mercy can step in, sparing them from the full weight of that unchangeable justice. The two things can and do exist at the same time. And so these medieval visions of 2 roads, 5 houses, a fallen knight, they leave us with a very modern question. As we try to navigate our own choices between what feels good right now and what holds long-term value, what does this ancient balance of consequence and forgiveness really ask of us today?